Hey everyone, welcome to episode 17 of Talking Headless. As always, LinkedIn managed to kick me out again. For some reason, this happens half the time, so I'm going to spend about 5 seconds getting this thing back in. Here we go. Okay, we're live. All right. So this is episode 17 of Talking Headless, and as always, great show. I'll get into that in a minute. I do have some housekeeping things I want to go through with you. First and foremost, there's another show coming on tonight, Engage with Paul and Kenny, where I, as you may know, do a show primarily focused on culture with Kenny Lauer, who's the former head of marketing for the Golden State Warriors. Our guest tonight is Chris Helfrich. He is the CEO of the Steph and Aisha Curry Foundation. He's a social entrepreneur. Honestly, he's a buddy of Kenny's. I don't know him. I'm going to meet him for the first time on the show. But one thing I can tell you, when you look at the picture of him, got a great smile. That much I can tell you. So 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight, same channel, PPN, come watch. Second thing is I want to remind you that end of November, on the night of November 11th and throughout the day on November 12th, PPN is celebrating the 15th anniversary of the CRM Players, and we've got IRL 2024, which is our first live conference. We're getting a lot of interest in the conference, which is interesting, given that we haven't really filled out the meat of it all yet. But I will tell you this: it is unique, and we're going to have an unusual thing going on. For example, we're going to have 4 simultaneous live streams going on. We're going to have opportunities for the audience to do reaction videos and watch parties about us, given that's turned the tables on us basically, since we've been doing it about them forever. We have. I know what I'd like to happen. I can't say this is done yet, but one of Ray Wong's CCEs, we had Ray and Brent DJ. I'd like that to happen again, but I have Ray's planning on being there, and Brent obviously is going to be there. So hopefully that'll happen. We're doing a bourbon and donuts tasting, right? So it's going to be fun. More will be coming probably within the month, where you'll get a much fuller picture of the agenda and the sponsors, if we happen to have any, and where it's going to be at the Atlanta Tech Village, the evening of November 11th, all day November 12th, and you can either schedule to go home the evening of November 12th or the morning of November 13th, because we'll be done by about 4:30. All right. With that, I want to get to segment 1. And as you know, with the format of the show, one of the things we've done, or I've done, is that I've decided after all these years that there's a lot of amazing human beings in the analyst relations world who have to work with a very difficult group of petulant people called analysts. And, you know, we're a highly opinionated bunch. We think we know everything. These people, aside from just generally being saints, are remarkably, I guess the best way to put this is they're astute, right? They get it. They understand who they're dealing with at the level of an individual as well as a group. And they know how to kind of work it, I guess is the best way. Because on the one hand, they have relationships to the individual. On the other hand, they have to basically, they still work for an employer so that the analyst's opinion matters to that employer, right? Whoever that is. Now, the person I have today, Kim Guillon, who runs the independent analyst program at Oracle, she's actually in the world of analyst relations signal. She's greater signal, right? The best way to put it is she's a unique individual in so many different ways. So, for example, one of the things that when you get to know Kim, that you find is her insane level of creativity. I mean, she's a remarkably creative human being. And look, I'm not saying other AR people don't have a creative streak. Kim is off the charts at the level of her creativity. So, for example, when me and Brent were doing something with Oracle about, I guess it's 3 years ago now, and Kim had come up with the idea of a rap battle. And it was actually probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen, is seeing two basically old white guys doing rap, but it was Kim's idea. Another thing, we were talking a few weeks ago about naming the tiers of sponsorship for IRL 2024, and I hadn't come up with anything. I'm not going to say what they are on the stage. I don't want to overdo it, but she came up with the idea of what they were. Brent and I loved it. We adopted it in 10 seconds. Then, just to give you a more recent example, we're talking just a few days ago, and I was talking about how I have the Meta Ray-Ban smart sunglasses. I was talking about walking down the hallways at IRL doing 1-minute interviews, and Kim came up with the idea of a T-shirt that said, "You better not say everything on your mind because this is live streamed," right? And you know what? We're doing it. This is just how she thinks. She's immediate. And the other thing is, and one of the things we really want to get into today, is that she did not come from the world of AR. She came from the world of PR. Now, I will tell you this, without going into any more detail about it. That's not an easy transition. It's not similar. Just because the R is the same word, the P and the A are not even closely related other than outreach. That transition, for the most part, when you put a PR person in an AR role, it's a failure, a complete failure. Kim has been wildly successful and arguably has the best independent analyst relations program of any company. So with that, I want to bring on my friend, Kim Guillon. Hey there.
Hi, Paul. I had to unmute myself. I appreciate the intro. Very sweet of you.
All true. The good thing about my intros, I realized I'm never saying something that's exaggerated, not a bit. Oh no, look, your creativity is incredible, and you're just a great person. So let's get through this, because I'm really fascinated by how one goes from PR to AR successfully. My history with, and it even includes your company, when a PR person's put in charge of AR, they always fail because they're looking for the wrong things, right? And so, can you talk about, one, kind of the history of how you ended up being put in a role, but two, what you've done to kind of succeed where others have dramatically, let's say, dramatically flamed out?
Totally. Yeah, I don't know, in this world that we live in, like to you, Paul, you're an independent analyst, but when I first started working with you, you had a ZDNet channel. And in a PR mind, it's like, who's writing those ZDNet channel pieces? Who's writing the Silicon Angle pieces and the TechCrunch pieces? And so it's like, okay, Paul Greenberg, you're obviously someone we have to know. You're a writer, you know the industry in and out, and people listen to you when they read your writing. So obviously you're somebody we want to get in front of, and lo and behold, there's many more like you out there. That really, it's a gray area essentially, that you touch the PR world because of ZDNet channels, and you talk with Ron Miller of TechCrunch, and you put the media in or quoted in there. But then you're also like a massive social influencer because you, in your retirement, have created the Players Network with Brent, and then of course you're an analyst on top of all of it. So you're a tribird or something like that, not even a hybrid. You're all of it. And my goal has just been to tell a story and work with you, and yeah.
So how do you look, when I talk to PR people put in a role, they would talk to me nonstop about placement. I mean, that's what they wanted. Placement. When are you going to write the article that will be placed when I was still writing for ZDNet? When are you going to do something for ZDNet? When are you going to do something for this? When are you going to write that? When are you going to do something here? And I would tell them all the time. They weren't bad people or anything. It's just I would tell them all the time, look, that's not what I'm doing. I don't do that. I don't write articles. I have a journalism degree. It's in editorial of all things, but I don't write as a journalist. I'm not there to put placement on articles placed on properties for you. I'm here as an analyst. My job is to sit there and talk about what I see good and bad and help people identify what is the value you bring and what are the things you don't bring. I said, that's what I do. Right. And I hopefully I can help you with that, whatever. But how do you deal with that? You've never, in all the time I've known you and with the analysts I know, have ever taken a PR head and applied it to any analyst that I've ever met. So how'd you figure that out?
I mean, it's all the value and where the audience is, right? Like the ZDNet pieces are very valuable from like a PR standpoint, but obviously like the CRM watch list, like massively valuable on an annual basis, and for the entire team, and being a winner was awesome too. So yeah, it's just different values and audiences and that, and just not, I guess, being too greedy, saying I want this, I want that. I mean, from a PR standpoint, I feel like you can't always assume that you're going to get the story that you want, and that's that. You kind of have to you have the relationship and work with the person. And like you said earlier, like Oracle is the company I work for, so bringing everything together and making everyone happy.
Well, I mean, one of the things that you've been very successful at, because, you know, aside from with me, I see your relationships to a lot of other analysts too, and I see them, you know, live, so to speak. They all like you, respect you, and have a relationship with you. And but that might sound okay. Well, that's the job, but it's actually not what happens a lot of times, right? So, for example, I know John Tashik at Salesforce has always told his teams, which is one of the reasons that they do what they do, has always told his teams that, look, it's without a doubt you're going to have a personal interactions with the people you're talking to, some more than others. Some are going to become your friends. He said you may even fall in love with one and marry them. Who knows? But the thing to remember, that he said, all of that's fine. You're human beings, right? But just the only thing I ask is remember who you work for. Now, I don't know if anyone's explicitly told you that, but that's how you operate, right? That's who you, and that is literally how you operate too, right? I mean, what is it about? Was that something that you just came to a conclusion was, or just kind of who you've been your whole life, or what?
I think relationships and relationship building is a big part of PR as well. Like if you don't have relationships with certain reporters, you just don't get the stories. And that's kind of what makes you as a PR person. I think in business in general, right? One of the things my father always told me, it's all about who you know in life. And it is all about the relationships and about who you know, and hey, who's my friend I can call up. But yeah, well, I was going to say at the end of the day, like in PR too, you have to protect the company. That's number one, because yeah, they're the one who give you the check at the end of the day. But yeah.
Okay, so actually, I want to also go to the your internal kind of relationships too, but I want to do it in the context of a question that Brent has for you. So how'd you come up with the idea of the rap battle, and how'd you actually get executives to do it? He's asking for a friend.
So I think listening to your intro of me, and like I didn't come from AR background, but I also like coming into Oracle, I didn't come from an enterprise tech background at all. I came from a consumer tech background where my clients were PayPal and Klarna and Loudmouth Golf and Duxiana and just very consumer facing brands. And so when I decided to go in-house, Oracle was available and interested in having me. And I'm like, okay, I'll give enterprise tech a try and see where it goes. But honestly, I think enterprise tech is a bit boring and it needs to have a little bit more fun. And because again, like it's B2C is a lot, we're all consumers, right? Even though we're B2B. But it doesn't, like we can still have fun while doing it. And so the rap battle was just an idea. I'm like, let's see if I could, like, it was just a crazy idea. I'm like, let's see if I can even pull it off.
Well, how did you recruit Jeff and Steve to it? That's what I want to know. How'd you even convince them to do it?
They're just great personalities. I mean, and the fact is I have great executives to work with. Not all executives, companies are so gracious and willing to try. And I think, yeah, the opportunity was there. Jeff and Steve are awesome characters and they make light of things and they're great storytellers of themselves. And why not do it with a rap battle?
Well, I will tell you one of the things that actually impressed me, and I remember this conversation with you. So if you remember the actual the recording we were doing of it, let's face it, it wasn't very, I'm being nice if I say it wasn't very good. It was hilariously funny. It was like bad, right? And Brent Mercy killed it. I mean, to Jeff and Steve, they had a ball trying to make it work. They were laughing. My entire contribution to it was just I'm laughing hysterically the whole time, right? But where I'm going with after that, you and I had a chat, and I think Brent was there too. And I said, look, it was pre-recorded. We don't have to run it. And you said, no, let's run it, right? And you understood it might have not been good technically what it was, but it was good for Oracle's personality, right? It really was. And it makes a difference. So that kind of thinking is not usual, especially, and I will tell you this, when it comes to PR, it's not at all the thinking. Look at when it comes to PR, no PR person thinks that way. They would have said, don't do it, right? But you said, yeah, let's do it. So take that kind of thinking and expand on why you're thinking in a way that actually understood multidimensionally, as opposed to, again, not trying to denigrate PR. It's necessary capability and function that's important, but it's a little more linear thinking process than what you're doing and what you did. So why? Well, how is it with you that worked?
So I guess like the first few years I worked at Oracle, I think I've been here like 8 years now, which is kind of crazy to me. But the first few years, you think about us 6-7 years ago, my whole job, and I had a sticky note on my desk, was to change perception of Oracle. We weren't necessarily in the best place. OCI hadn't necessarily come out yet. And we needed to change the perception of Oracle. Oracle, not cool necessarily at that time. It was before F1 and the Oracle Red Bull Racing. Like our CMO had done a really good job with that, but you look at that. And so, yeah, really just trying to change the perception of Oracle. And I was kind of shocked my team actually let me go through with the rap battle. I mean, I let everyone know that it was going on. The social team was even involved, and they didn't want to publish it, but I said, no, like it wasn't supposed to be good. You're missing the point.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes a difference. I mean, look, between Redwood and things like that you're doing, it made a big difference in Oracle's, not just look and feel, but culture and personality as a company. It made a huge difference all in all. So, you were absolutely on the right track always. So I have one more question that I think might take a little time to, if you want to take a little time to answer. And this is like, give people a picture of like you off camera, so to speak, or off job. about the things that you like doing and why you like doing them, and what are the things that just make you kind of happy to do? Just
Yeah, I like
roll.
to be on the water, on the boat, paddleboarding, California girl, so kind of always out in the sunshine or at the pool. My goal this year was to learn how to ski, not water ski, but snow ski. And I did it successfully. I didn't break any bones, so
Wow.
happy about that.
Wow. How'd you, wow. That's, see, I'm literally imagining myself trying to do that and hitting a tree immediately, right? I was like, I'll put it this way: I can't even play Fortnite without getting killed. So, you know, so okay, so when you were early on in your career, did you start in PR?
Yeah, I feel like PR marketing, and then writing press releases, pitching the media. I feel like I was always pretty good at telling the stories. One of my first clients was Loudmouth Golf. They're the ones with the funny pants John Daly wears.
Oh, okay, I know who they are now. You said that.
Yeah, it was like a funky, fun company, and I mean, I was able to come on ESPN and pitch the Today Show, and it's just so much fun.
Although I wouldn't, John Daly's not exactly the golf role model I'd want, I don't think. But I get the point nonetheless. So do you now see, okay, so let's say this. Oracle has reached this point. You have done a lot with independent analysts over the last several years. You basically program, I mean, in the early days of Oracle, when Susie Penner was trying to create it, she had to call us bloggers. I know Josh will remember that. I remember specific moment in time with Josh, let's say, being a little bit upset about something when we were still in the blogger program. But I mean, she couldn't even get the idea. An independent analyst was completely taboo at Oracle. You couldn't even have one because we had to be called bloggers to be let in to anything, right? And then, with Letty, it took further steps after Susie left, and now with you, it's basically a solid, and then they had a couple of people in between Letty and you, but they were interim and short term, and one was very, very PR, and now they got you, and now you have given it solidity. You've actually made it into a real program. So, final question is, where are you going with it over the next year or so?
Oh man, yeah, we've talked about this because I love your thoughts on it, on really going, keeping the independence and really, doing good stuff and the work that we do there, but looking outside the box a little bit on, pure social influencers, very much like the Cleo Abrams or DeMarcus, and seeing how we can tell our stories on social, because that's where everyone's looking, right? I mean, on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, that idea would take you to a different level for a program like this. To me, it's not. A lot of people think, oh well, brand influencers who are Avita, but that's not who you're talking about at all. I mean, why don't you talk just briefly, and then to close it out, to follow up a little bit of elaboration on that, just by giving them an idea of, say, Cleo, and what she's like. I think that would help people understand what you mean.
Yeah, so Cleo's really interesting because she is essentially a video journalist. She works as a journalist, but on her own. And so, putting my PR hat back on, ethically, it was awesome working with her. And she's a storyteller. Not every social influencer is a videographer or has the journalistic background, but some do. But yeah, YouTube influencers, LinkedIn influencers. That's where everybody's watching, and will continue to watch, I think, for the next bit.
Yeah, well, and the final thing I'll say about you, and then I'll let you go, is that the people that you've been talking about. So, for example, Cleo or Marcus Brownlee, people like that. These are people who have substance as well as subscribers and views, right? They have substance, right? And they're not just brainless, oh, well, look, they can dance on TikTok, which to the credit of some of them, they're good dancers, but they're not the people you're talking about. So Kim, thank you. You know that. I mean, I love you to pieces anyway. So thank you so much. And again, what you do, just keep thinking the way you're thinking, because you are so creative and so smart. And I'm going to add a new word for you to think about. You're very strategic. All right.
Thank you.
Just keep
Really
that in mind.
appreciate it.
All right, my dear. I will be talking to you very shortly, and thank you.
Thank you. Love you too. Bye.
Bye. All right. As always, I love her. I just do. She's like an amazing human being at so many levels. Okay. So now my next guest is somebody that you're actually quite familiar with because he's been on many of our shows. He's got a big footprint in the enterprise tech world. He's been an analyst for, I don't know, 25, 30 years by now. Long time. He doesn't look it, but he has been it. He looks, I'll put it this way. If I was saying he's an analyst for 30 years, he literally looks like he's been an analyst since the day he was born. Okay. So this guy, I met him. I'm going to tell you how I met him and how much impact he has as a result on me. I had heard about Josh Greenbaum, but I hadn't met the guy, and I heard interesting and good things generally about him, but I heard he was a pretty tough questioner, and I thought, okay, whatever. And we were at this SAP event together, and I hadn't talked to him yet, and we were in this kind of boardroom-ish kind of place, and he stood up and asked the question, and I actually don't remember the question, but I do remember my response to it, which was, oh my God, like it was so pointed and so tough. It was not harsh. It was pointed and tough, right? And a question that had to be asked. Now, I'm going to tell you, and it's actually somewhat germane to what we'll be talking about today, but another story about Josh. And this is the one I was alluding to. Back in the days of the blogger program at Oracle, all the bloggers were invited to this meeting of the bloggers and analysts, a lot of analysts, and we're in this big room. And it was a sort of an analyst briefing. And they had all these slides, and some slides were NDA and some slides were not. And we got to a point where the head of AR at the time was getting to the Q&A, and she said, well, okay, time for Q&A, and ask any question you want, except for the bloggers. They can't ask questions. And all of us were like, but Josh didn't waste 2 seconds, and he stood up, and let's just say, I haven't heard anybody rip a new one like that in a long time, but it was right, and took them aback. And I will tell you, that never happened again, ever, at Oracle. And that's thanks to Josh, because he stood there and said what had to be said. But the other thing that was impressive about it wasn't just what he said, but the lightning speed he moved on after the comment. It was lightning. I mean, we had just barely had our mouths drop by the time he was up and saying, I've been an analyst for, this is why I say 30 years, for 20 years. And it was about 10 years ago. And then he just went. This guy, he's truthful. He's insightful. He knows the industry inside and out. And he's been a force for a long time. And one last thing, an absolutely outstandingly good writer, just from the standpoint of the craft of writing. Okay. And again, journalism in English for me. So that's always a real plus. So with that, I want to bring on Josh Greenbaum. Hey there, man.
Hey, my head's not going to fit in the screen if you keep on like that. No.
I will never forget those. Both of those things were just like,
yeah, there's a lot more to that story than just that. But oh my goodness, that was quite a. Yeah, was that only 10 years ago? It feels like it was.
Oh, I actually think it was more than that because
A little bit.
whenever Susie worked at Oracle, but
Yeah.
I was saying 10 years for dramatic purposes mostly, right? So
Yeah,
I
probably
really
a
don't know the date. It was a long time ago. I had more hair then, and it was black at the
Me
time,
too.
or dark brown.
All of us.
So
Yeah.
so you and I have talked beforehand, and there was something that I thought would be really interesting to talk about, and something that never does get talked about either, which was, when do you reach? There's a lot of vendors out there, and there's no way in hell we can cover the full range of everybody, obviously. So we pick and choose who we want to cover, and at the same time, we cover them whether we're in their circle or not. Our preference, though, of course, is to be as part of their program so that we can get better information, better knowledge, and a more, let's say, a more in-depth picture. I don't know if it'll be fairer. Just we're going to hear what they have to say.
Comprehensive for sure.
Yeah. So, but there comes a point where sometimes you don't
Just
get
say it, man. You
invited.
get excluded.
No, it's not that.
You get blacklisted.
But it's still, well, I don't know. Let's say this. You don't get invited for
Right.
whatever reason. Okay. And there's a million reasons it could be possible. Most of them, honestly, not legitimate. So why don't you talk to that? Because you've not only been subject to it, and I am too, actually, oddly enough, with the company that you think is the reason why the other ones won't talk to you.
Right. It's always
Yeah.
Let me run with this, and I want to frame this in sort of. Let me put a framework in it. It's really, the framework is about so the problem set is is that certain vendors think that certain analysts, and again it's somewhat arbitrary, should or should not be allowed inside the tent to hear the important information for reasons that are perceived as potentially bias or some other potential negative, and therefore there's sort of this sense of you're either one of us or you're the enemy. And so let me present a framework for that, why that's crazy, literally, and self-defeating on the part of these vendors. And it's really the framework is that there it involves an important customer trend, a fallacy that's sort of driven by the big analyst firms and their cohorts in some of the AR programs, and then a major mistake that vendors then make as a result of this. So the important customer trend, and this is really key to to particularly my issue, is that customers more and more need to build process excellence in their companies across product silos, across heterogeneous landscapes of products that they acquired over the years through acquisition, sometimes don't necessarily work well together. They don't necessarily fit well together, but the imperative of the business world today is to get that stuff to work together. This is a raison d'etre for companies like ServiceNow, UiPath, Solonis, Signavio, but also every major vendor is doing it. If you're an SAP, an Oracle, an Infor, you've got a big product portfolio, you're pulling those things together. If you're a more narrow category kind of vendor like a Salesforce or a Workday, you're actually trying to do that anyway. In fact, Workday and Salesforce just had a little announcement. They're going to join forces on the data side because they have to build this heterogeneity into the products that they sell to their respective, and in this case, similar customers. And this really sets the stage for a problem that needs to be solved for customers, which is that software products need to be seen in the context of their ability to function in these complex end-to-end processes, not just as standalone products.
Amen.
Not just as category leaders, which leads to the analyst firm driven fallacy. And I'm going to just go right there with that. I'm soft-spoken and demure on these issues. A lot of vendors really kowtow to this notion that the only raison d'etre for an analyst relations effort is to get into the MQ, get into the upper right-hand quadrant and the wave, and to be listed as a category leader. And there's some value to that. I'm not going to deny it, but that seems to, in many cases, be the only reason you do it. So all you do as an analyst firm as the analyst relations team within your vendor category, and indeed in these bigger companies, you're the CRM folks, you're the HR folks, you're the ERP folks. That's all you do is try to get your product in that MQ. And you do that despite the fact that from the customer standpoint, there's no way that you can solve your multi-enterprise ERP supply chain problem by buying a multi-enterprise supply chain product alone. It has to do something called integrate with everything else you've got. You can't solve retail commerce problems by just buying the best retail commerce platform. You've got to have this very comprehensive view. So to narrowcast your AR efforts into this categorization that is frankly more about the business model of some of these analyst firms than it is about serving the needs of the customer, places this conflict into a framework of, okay, we're going to talk to the people who get CX the best, and we don't even need to talk to those other folks because they're not relevant, and if they're too close to our competitor, we're definitely not going to talk to them because, God forbid, we should let them hear what our strategy is. And that leads to a really fundamental vendor mistake, which is that you only talk to analysts who specialize in your product. And in those companies with multiple products, you sort of separate those different analysts into different groups. You have different briefings for them. You never bring it together. You have big conferences where you're not trying to actually sell, the comprehensive end-to-end product. You're trying to sell the thing that you built called CX to the CX buyer.
Right.
And you miss this really important problem, which is that the customer needs this very comprehensive view of a heterogeneous landscape where stuff has to work together regardless of which vendor it comes from. So to flip that into what I'm here to gripe about, and thank you for inviting me to do this, is that often folks like me and you, we independents get categorized as the enemy, as that Josh, and this is me. Josh is an SAP specialist. We're not going to let him talk to our analyst people, our stakeholders, because all he does is shill for SAP. And of course, what I shill for is the SAP customer,
right,
not SAP, the product company.
Right.
You can believe me, you've been in the room. I don't necessarily make friends and lovers in SAP land when I'm asking those kind of questions that you referred to, at the beginning here. I'm there to advocate on behalf of the customer and to make the customer successful. And so, ironically, as a result, and I just mentioned this in a podcast I did, a webcast I did yesterday, I'm now facing this interesting problem in the SAP space where SAP has this issue of trying to migrate everyone into the cloud as for HANA. The customers are holding back. SAP is setting up some arbitrary deadlines for when they're going to end support. And here's a bunch of customers who are sitting in an old on-premise finance system. And some of them are running this thing called Workday. And this company called Workday happens to have some pretty good finance stuff lately. SAP is at risk for having these customers talk to a competitor if they can't get their act together. Now, if I were Workday, to be blunt, I would maybe want to talk to someone like Josh, who is talking to those very customers that have to face that dilemma to get a balanced view of what their options are. I'm not necessarily going to tell them to go to SAP or Workday. I may tell them to go somewhere else entirely. Maybe Microsoft Dynamics is better for them. But the point is to have this sort of tunnel vision about product, category, friend or enemy is to miss the opportunity to talk to someone who has a broad reach across a wide range of customers who are they're just trying to solve a problem. And for the most part, they couldn't care necessarily who the vendor is as much as who can make their business run better. Okay. Rant over, but that's my focus of why I'm here and why I wanted to sort of talk about this, because I think the vendors really need to loosen up a little bit on the AR side and look at this cross-pollination opportunity as something that's positive and not a negative to be kind of.
Not only do I agree, I double down on something like that. I will tell you, I think there's another facet that's probably a little less preeminent than it used to be, but it's still there. And if I was still a Marxist, I'd call it classist, right? But I'm not, but I'll still call it classist. There's a perception, and it particularly goes to on the highly experienced AR people's side, that the only companies that matter are the institutional analysts. right? And that's Gartner, Forrester, IDC, perhaps, and that's it. And that's, to your point, Magic Quadrant. Also, to their credit, there are more customer inquiries to them than there would be to any other group of institutions of analysts.
by dint of their size.
Exactly. But it is what it is. And there's value. To me, there's been three groups, or broadly, three groups of three group types. There's the institutional guys like that. Then there are the boutique firms, which are kind of market research firms mixed with analysts. And that could be Constellation, that could be Ventana, companies like that, Futurum, those kind of companies. And then there are the independents like you and me and Brent and hundreds of others, actually. And I think that there are a number of companies that still hold that the most important thing is to just make sure that, to your point, that Gartner, Forrester, maybe IDC are taken care of, because the Magic Quadrants or the Wave or the whatever IDC, the market, something that IDC does, matters. And it does matter, but that doesn't ignore the rest, right? Yeah, so here you go.
And I think part of the problem is that, and there's more and more this trend to do metrics-driven marketing, metrics-driven analyst relations programs. And the problem becomes one of sort of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you can measure the interactions through a Gartner, through an IDC, much better. You have a better way to look at those metrics than you do to see the metrics of a Josh or a Paul or Brent's conversations, interactions, because they happen in a way that just don't lend themselves to that kind of measurement. And I literally saw this recently. Someone showed me in an analyst relations team one of these metrics-driven models, and it was really great. And I said, so what happens? How do you record the interactions I have when I speak to an audience at the America's SAP user group? About heterogeneity, by the way. But and she said, well, we don't really have that in the model. I said, well, so how do you understand where those interactions?
Yeah, quantitative side too. I mean, look,
if you're going to quantify it, you got to make sure you're getting all the data.
Yeah, and the qualitative conversations matter. I mean, it's never been one or the other, right? Well, that's the thing. I mean, to your point entirely is, a lot of people grew up. A lot of the AR people have been around 25 or 30 years. Grew up in the world where there was no real, again, they grew up in a world where Susie Penn had to call us bloggers, right? Well, that's the world they grew up in, and because we had to be hidden, right? But what they didn't realize, but here's the deal. I've looked at this extensively. At one point, I was actually considering developing an independent analyst association, right? And I still haven't. I mean, I think because I'm almost 75, I might have ruled it out by now, but not entirely. I have a list, let's just say, of independent analysts. And the deal is that they don't understand something. We may not get the customer reference calls, but we impact markets, and we do that. And we've done that for 2 decades. And it's more an oblivious view. Look, you get people who are, I'll call them the progressives, again, speaking political terms, like Kim, who does get it totally. Or even, look, regardless of individual stuff, generally Salesforce gets it because of Tashik, right? I mean, and Ann and those guys understand. They even think, and Kim, you heard her thinking, is thinking in terms of, analysts as part of a broader group of influencers with impact, right? And she gets that. And but also analysts specifically, because where they're going to help, where a lot of the social influencers that she was talking about aren't, is we advise too. That's the other thing. Right. We have a deep sense of market, and we advise, which is where they don't, but they will have the impact too. I love Kim's idea. And so I think the world's changed, and it's changed a lot. And I think more and more the enterprise vendors are starting to get it. But, as everything goes, there's always the holdouts, and the holdouts are the people who still work there after 25 or 30 years, or in the field after 25 or 30 years, who just haven't changed their thinking because they don't care to.
I think some executives are a little scared and need a little more sort of training, if you will, in terms of being open to having honest and
Yeah, well, we're not. Well, again, it's not PR, it's AR, right? I mean,
Right. There's my friend, our friend, our mutual friend John Reed has some really interesting ideas about how do you run, some of these analyst events, and and actually really open it up to a real dialogue. Sandy does that at Zoho. No one else seems to do that. Dare to allow us, as if we would shaft a customer. They're our customers too, for goodness sake. Let us just
well, not
talk
only
to
that,
them.
we're trying. Look, I mean, most of the people. Look, I mean, there is a dynamic among us that I understand where some reluctance would come, which is, and some of it comes in those big AR Q&A things where one analyst is trying to out alpha the other one, whatever it is. They're out proving how smart they are. I rarely speak in those environments because I can't stand them particularly. Because there's always people there.
Cattle calls.
Well, they're basically, but they're also people trying to prove how important they are, how intelligent they are, or how tough they are. Like when you ask a question, it's pointed, but there's a purpose, right? There's a purpose that's trying to get them, whoever them is, to solve something that they have to solve. And the only way, because it's thoughtful, the only way that they can solve it is if it's raised in an environment where they need to respond, right? And it's just,
well, yeah, to the extent, right.
And I'm guessing
tough love,
right. And I'm guessing at time you've already tried it privately at some point, right? Well, yeah, typically, because I do the same. With me, to me, those are calculated things. They're not. I have to prove I'm a smart analyst, or I have to prove that I'm important. I don't like those sessions. I never did. But to your point, when they are the kind of sessions where look, for example, I love companies like ServiceNow, and I really do. But when they do the open Q&A with, say, Bill McDermott or something, he's selling me, and I know that, and I like him. It has nothing to do with that. I actually like the guy, but I'm not going to get an answer that I want to get, and at no point in it. Now, if I had a private conversation with him, I know I could, and I know he'd respond reasonably because it's a private conversation. His job at the moment in those public environments is to talk about the benefit of the company that he leads. And he's not wrong to do that. I'm not saying it's like the wrong thing. I'm saying he's restricted by the nature of what it is. Right. And so from my standpoint, I like your approach. I like your approach of it's pointed because there's a purpose to what you're saying, as opposed to just kind of saying the thing that came to your mind that moment.
Right. Well, look, I think that there's a couple of things about this. One is that while many analyst programs are under, come out of the marketing budget, and frankly, that's because marketing has budget. It's a fallacy to think that we are part of the marketing effort, and I think that's a big issue in the sense that we are part of the metrics that drive marketing. Lead generation being one of the more key issues. That to say that analysts should be supporting lead gen or die is of course another problem here. My job is to help customers understand product and help make an intelligent decision. If that decision points towards your product, yes, but I'm not there to support necessarily your marketing efforts. And I think that's a big problem. And I think the other thing is it's not just about asking questions, it's about giving answers. And that's where I think a lot of, again, AR programs fail to see that we particularly the independents, folks like us who are looking across huge swaths of the industry, we have that outside in mentality that is, and it really is valuable. You and I can both, look at the companies that take that advice and see how much more successful they are in a lot of ways because they see that. So, I think it also has to do with the fact it's not just about letting us ask a question. It's about bringing us in as part of a dialogue about how do you, as a vendor, succeed because your customers are succeeding. And again, that's my point. I'm there, and I have conflicts with AR people, and I keep saying, you understand, we are on the same team insofar as when I'm talking to one of your customers, I want them to be successful. Maybe success for that customer does not involve buying your latest product. but you're going to have to figure that one out for yourself. Maybe that's because your product's flawed.
Look, I mean, to your point, I think there's certain companies out there. Well, we know Zoho, of course, is always sort of the paradigmatic example of everything. But aside from them, you look at I still consider, for example, ServiceNow the world's largest unicorn, right? They're amazing to me what they keep doing. Their AR program is actually quite, if you look at it relative to, let's say, it's actually fairly big. I mean, meaning they've got not like Salesforce's, but the number of people who are in it. It's a crack team. That said, they also, the thing that I'm learning about them most recently, and you know where I'm coming from with this, is that they're willing to overcome their biases if they have them. I think I don't necessarily.
We shall see.
Right. And
we shall see.
I'll say that I trust them. I do. I really do. And
ServiceNow is a great example because they are everywhere.
Yes.
There is not a customer of any size in the industry that isn't talking to them and working with their software some way or another. They're everywhere. So to exclude a person like me from their program because I don't know what whatever they were thinking at the time when I used to cover them is just silly because you can exclude me. I'm still talking to your customers all the time.
Well, the thing with them is, I think so, and we'll get to this is sort of the final point, but to this point, which is, I think there were also, if I'm looking at the kind of roiling effort that we're all the roiling of series of events that are driving all these companies and so on. AR teams, as good as they may be, and there's some great ones, make mistakes, and the mistakes are sometimes, how things are. Sometimes things kind of accumulate over time in a place, and a false positive or a false negative gets created. Those kind of things happen, and you can only take what you see at face because you don't know any better one way or the other. So it's not hard to pop a bubble once somebody comes in and says no, pop. I think ServiceNow is one of those companies. I think Salesforce can be most of the time. Zoho doesn't even make those mistakes, apparently. I'm trying to think of a time where that happened and I can't. Oracle actually has gotten better and better and better and better over the years to the point where they're really gotten I can't speak for I still think there's somewhat of a false separation between the independent analysts and the analyst relations team. It's a separation that shouldn't be there. That said, if that eliminated Kim from the mix, I don't want there to be a combination of the two.
Right.
I'd rather keep her any day of the week. So, but I think Oracle's gotten much better. I think we're seeing, look, there's a lot of very good people there. And there's a lot of very good people who will listen to reason. And there's a lot of very good people who will act on listening to reason. And I think the more we, as analysts, focus in on who those good people are, address them, we'll be able to crack through some of this other crap that's going on. Look, honestly, and to your point about ServiceNow, my point of SAP, I have no relationship to that company at all. I have a lot of promises they've made to me 100 times, but they've been, if I had to characterize it, I'd say disrespectful. And I'm not like that. You know me. I'm not like that.
That's just a damn shame.
I don't know.
It shouldn't be that way. And I don't think that the folks in product engineering think that way.
No, they don't. And I have literally over 100 friends still at SAP who I love. They're some of my longest standing friends in this whole industry.
And let me add, more importantly, the customers respect you. And that's really where the bottom line should be.
Again,
the SAP customers should be talking to, the people who who matter. It kind of make the right decisions.
Because I advised the company, CRM CX team mostly, but I advised the company for 13 years straight. And then one AR person who was horrible basically just undercut the whole thing. And then
reasons that are just always mysterious.
Well, I know the reason.
It's personal in a way that
it's a combination of the personality of the individual combined with the old school thinking. The only thing that mattered is Gartner Forrester. And once that happened, and the communication lines got cut, and they've been the CX team, to be honest, I'm not optimistic about them in CX at all. So I would wish.
I'm going to say, for the record, you should take another look.
I have
I
taken
think
as
there's
much
some
of a
pretty
look
good
as I'm
stuff.
going to. I'm not saying
You know,
technically it's
No,
bad.
I'm just speaking for the customers I've spoken to who actually.
Oh, again, it's not a technical issue with me. It's a matter of what they do to make that an industry standard, I'll call it. I'm not really quite the word. I think they do a terrible.
We'll have that. We can debate that.
Yeah, I don't see it. They're not a competitor. Well, let's say this: they're not seen as a competitor. I'm not saying they're not.
No, definitely not.
No. Well, it's their problem. They've pivoted on it back and forth for 5 years, 5 times in 14 years.
At least
that's the problem. A lot of it's but you can't trust them to not pivot again. Again, I would love it to be good, because the more good there is out there, and I like. I'm not going to get into it. It's not worth it. Okay, so anyway, well, we could do it all day. I don't want to bitch about it.
Right. We need a wrap.
We each have our companies. On the whole, though, the idea is what you're saying is, I think, to your point, right now, this is the time where these vendors just need to open up, and to your point about the heterogeneity of technology and thus of customers, almost as a requirement for the customer to be able to understand how that works. We're the people they tend to go to, right? So the vendors need to listen.
They need to really expand their vision of what is a category and what is an analyst.
Absolutely. They actually listen to just what they really need is just listen to you. That's what they need.
And you.
Nah, I'm retiring.
And us. Yes.
I'm retiring. Right. So
yeah,
they don't have to listen to me.
Story before.
Well, sure. I'm close. I'm 70% retired now. I need another 30% to go. By next year, I'll be 95. So I've got it all worked.
You heard it here first. I don't believe you. Yes. Okay.
All right, my friend. As always, it was wonderful, extraordinary. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Yeah, you're the best. All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, Brent. I know you're back there somewhere.
All right.
I'll catch you guys soon.
All right. We will see everybody. That's it for this month. We'll see you at the end of next month. Mashed up, broken into two. I didn't know I was pretty till I took a look at you and I'm rolling. Yeah, I'm still rolling. Baby, there ain't nothing I can lose and I sure got the blues. Hey!
This has been a Players Productions Network digital broadcast.